In the 1960s, many a passenger would have taken their first ever flight on board one of these, a Vickers Viscount. Around the same time, Odeon cinemas up and down the country were screening a weekly series of short films entitled Look at Life. In all, the Rank organisation produced over 500 Look at Lifes covering a wide variety of subjects. Well, here's the first of 6 that we've compiled depicting the civil aviation industry as it was in the 1960s.
Time to get up. Alarms are going off all over Britain. It's the start of another working day for millions. And today in Britain, nearly 8 million women go out to work. Pat Rossiter has a job that many girls dream about. She's an air hostess, one of well over 1,000 employed on British Airlines. But like many other girls, she starts her working day with a bus ride. She's got used now to the half-curious, half-envious glances of women doing more routine jobs. After all, there's some excuse for thinking that an air hostess has a glamorous life, a life of travel, excitement, and perhaps romance. Pat Rossiter came to England from Auckland, New Zealand. She became an air hostess 3 years ago. She had 6 weeks intensive training to start with and has been hard at work ever since. She earned just over £10 a week at first, and of course her uniform was provided. She's certainly travelled, but not quite fast enough this morning.
I wonder where she's got to. You're 10 minutes late, Miss Rossiter.
Sorry, sir.
Well, our flight to Rome will take us 3 hours, 10 minutes, flying at 23,500 feet.
Yes, sir.
We'll be carrying 63 passengers, including 5 children.
Yes.
But don't forget, keep the bar closed until we're well across the channel. We shall be on the ground for 1 hour at Rome to refuel before continuing to Benghazi, which will take a further 3 hours.
Thank you.
Have you any questions?
Yes, sir. How do you like your coffee?
The day before the flight, hostesses check the stores they'll need.
Yes. 2 bar boxes.
Yes.
Linen.
Yes.
Blankets 30.
That's right.
Pillows 60.
Yes.
And 6 oxygen sets.
Yes, that's right.
3 maps and the first aid,
Yes.
publicity, service trays 2.
Yes.
Tea towels, dishcloth and soda siphon.
Yes, that's right.
Soap powder,
Yes.
aerosol, fresh air, cotton wool,
Yes.
serviettes, paper
Yes.
cups.
Oh, paper cups for the cans.
Well, thank you. Barley sugar, baby food,
Yes.
biscuits,
Yes.
bovril,
Yes.
sauce, tomato sauce,
Yes.
salad cream,
Yes.
pickled onions,
Yes.
salt and pepper,
Yes.
and soup assorted.
Yes. And the sick bags.
Check sick bags.
On the day of the flight itself, it isn't just a case of driving out to the plane and flying off. There's a lot to be done first. Before the crew arrive, an army of ground crew and storesmen are servicing the aircraft, tanking up with fuel, loading the stores, and seeing the luggage and the freight aboard. Meanwhile, the hostesses are busy dressing the inside of the aircraft, seeing that every passenger has a clean blanket. Pat, at 24, is now a senior hostess and is responsible for the look of the passenger cabin as well as the comfort of the passengers. On this flight, there are 2 hostesses, and Anne Coulburn, the junior, helps with the cushions and seat covers. There's a flight map, a menu, and a price list for drinks to be provided for each passenger. The catering staff bring in the stores, the pre-cooked meals, the milk, coffee, sugar and biscuits. And each item is carefully checked and put away in the restricted space of the galley. The bar can either be duty-paid or duty-free. But if the drinks are free of duty, the bar may not be opened until the aircraft is outside British territory, in this case, over the channel. A final check over the route to North Africa just to make sure they'll know the answers to passengers' questions. The crew arrive well before the passengers to check the aircraft for themselves. It's usually an hour's hard work before Pat is ready to greet the passengers with a cool, calm smile. It's not just businessmen and VIPs who fly these days. Flying is for the whole family, right down to the youngest.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In a few moments' time, we shall be taking off for Rome and Benghazi. Please fasten your seatbelts. Thank you.
Once the plane is on its way and the passengers comfortably settled, the meals have to be prepared. And serving 40 or more hot meals in 15 minutes takes some doing, especially in such a small space. It's just a matter of keeping cool and teamwork. Serving drinks up and down the narrow gangway is no joke, especially when you clash with the restless type. Excuse me, please. Thank you. Of course, it's not all gin and whiskey that's served. Some passengers like something with more kick in it. Yes, a hostess must expect to be a barmaid, a nursemaid, a cook, and waitress on every flight. And with so many children traveling, a touch of the school teacher might help too. Then there's the crew to be looked after. On long flights, the pilots like to be served with coffee or something to eat every half hour to break the monotony. This flight takes 11 hours. The washing up is done mainly by the catering staff at the airport, but on a busy flight, it's just another job for the hostess. While the passengers are admiring the view over Benghazi, Pat is busy seeing their safety belts are properly fastened for the landing. Another flight over, and the hostess is the last to leave the plane. To her, one airport looks very much like another, and Pat doesn't find this one exciting. No sign of those romantic sheiks that some girls dream about. But away from the airport, time off in Benghazi can be fun. Most crews spend their leisure time together, and some companies provide a yacht for them to use. However, these moments are all too short, and soon it's time to return home to London Airport. But tomorrow, who knows? She may be off to Paris or Rome, Singapore or Cape Town, or even to Manchester. She's ready to go anywhere to cope with any situation, always with the same quiet, cool confidence. But right now, all she wants is a bus home.
Within a year of that film being made, Hunting Clan, the airline featured there, merged with its associate Airwork to form British United Airways and moved to Gatwick. This next film depicts a comet coming into land at London Airport in thick fog, being talked down by air traffic control.
Every day at peak hours, a plane lands at London Airport every 2 minutes. 75,000 safe landings a year. And these passengers leaving Frankfurt, like the 6 million people who fly in and out of London every day, take it all for granted. They know that modern airliners can cope with bad weather. They know, too, that their safety depends on science as well as human skill, on radio beacons, on the relentless eyes of radar, on instruments that enable pilots to fly blind. They know that 20,000 feet or more beneath them, men chart every stage of their progress. What they never see is the intricate ground control system ever ready for any emergency. Emergencies of weather and that menace of big cities, fog. Just look at the conditions here at London Airport. No wonder the jet fleets are grounded today. But other planes are coming in, among them the Comet from Frankfurt. Here's a pilot's eye view of the approach lighting system, which extends 3,000 feet out from the runway. Here, inside the control tower, they know the position, height, speed, and estimated time of arrival of the planes up there in and above the fog. Here are the airport's eyes and ears. Here, in the tower that never closes, are the shepherds of the jetliners. Here, they marshal the planes which show up as blips or smears on the radar screens. That organ pedal is the operator's aerial control as he lines up his radar with an incoming aircraft. The radar screens are graded in miles. The first with a 10-mile scan, the second an enlargement of the first 2.5 miles out from the airport. But before the airliners get within range of these screens, they've been tracked along the approaches to London, some of the most rigidly controlled aerial highways in the world. Among them now is the Frankfurt Comet, coming in through the murk. Soon, it'll be talked down by the men in London Airport's tower. In bad weather, in fog, they stack the incoming planes 1,000 feet above each other over Watford and Epsom Downs until they're ready to land them.
Direct to Beeline Mike Golf is over Epsom, flight level 50, turning right onto 050.
Roger, Mike Golf. Descend now to 2,000 feet of Quebec and November Hotel 1008, 1008.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are descending now for our landing at London Airport Heathrow. Would you please fasten your seat belts, and if you are smoking, extinguish your cigarettes. After the landing, would you remain seated until the aircraft has stopped and the engines have been switched off?
Mike Golf, I have you 9 miles southeast, turn left, steer 360 degrees.
On the radar screen, the sloping track gives the Comet's height and angle of descent towards the airport. The lower track registers its course and distance from the runway.
Mike Golf is approaching the glide path, 6.5 miles out. Commence your rate of descent.
You need to be an expert to detect the tiny streak of light moving from the right in each track. That is a fully loaded 70-ton Comet. It's coming in on a 3-degree glide path, a shallow, comfortable descent for the passengers. And by keeping the plane to that dotted center line, the controller will bring it right onto the runway. It's all so precise that at 1 mile distance from the runway, the Comet will be 318 feet above the ground. This is a precision approach. It's known as a full torque down, with the tower torquing the pilot to the point where he's got the runway in sight. And that means a 1/4 or a 1/2 mile, depending on his airline's regulations.
Mike Golf, 3.5 miles to go, in the glide path, heading of 278 is good. 3 miles to go, Mike Golf. 2 miles to go, Mike Golf.
And there, moving leftwards, is the Comet, represented now by a thick smear on each track as the scanner goes up and down.
1.5 miles to go, Mike Golf. In the glide path, on the center line. 1 mile to go, Mike Golf. Heading 278 is good. In the glide path. Half a mile to go, Mike Golf. 278 is good. In the glide path. Half a mile to go, Mike Golf. In the glide path, on the center line. 500 yards to go, Mike Golf. Look ahead and land.
Mike Golf, think up. Full flat is
Full flat.
light idle
Light idle.
and ground.
And ground.
Reverse.
Full reverse going on.
Another torque down completed. Just another routine landing, they say. But there are more planes where this has come from. No wonder air traffic control officers need to have a break every 2 hours. Effective as the present talk-down system is, here's something that makes it seem positively old-fashioned. A brand new method of blind landing that's completely automatic. It depends on a very precise radio altimeter and 2 parallel cables stretching for 1 mile out from the runway for lining up the plane. This special aerial picks up the signals from the cables. The backroom boys at the Ministry of Aviation's Blind Landing Experimental Unit at Bedford, who've developed this incredible aid to safety, have tried out their ghost pilot in well over 4,000 landings. And now let's see what happens. Look, no hands. The plane is now under the control of an automatic pilot with a computer. Information from the radio signals is fed into it. If the plane gets off course, the automatic pilot sets it right. Meanwhile, scientists check instruments which record what's happening as the plane heads towards the runway, steering itself. About 50 feet above the ground, the flare-out or leveling begins. From then on, the radio altimeter reduces the rate of descent so that a smooth landing is made. The automatic throttle, which has kept the speed steady, now cuts back the engines. Below 20 feet, the wings are held level and any drift is corrected by automatic use of the rudder. Already, many of Britain's latest aircraft are being fitted with the autopilot and radio altimeter parts of the new system. It's another step forward in man's conquest of the air and brings nearer the day when even dense fog will lose its power to shut down big airports.
Well, that Comet flight deck was fairly obviously an early simulator. This one, however, is for real. It's the cockpit of a Vickers VC-10, the last airliner to be built here at Brooklands. It entered service in 1964, at the same time and place as this next film, City of the Air.
It's the busiest airport in Europe and handles more international air traffic than any airport in the world. It's a city in itself, covering more than 4 square miles. It's Heathrow, better known to millions of air travellers as London Airport. And in a few years' time, such is the growth of civil aviation, it won't be able to cope with the air traffic flying in and out of London. Ever since its opening in 1946, traffic has built up year by year. In a single month, more than 1 million passengers have landed or taken off from here, and the yearly average is 8 million. Soon, it'll be 10 million. Among them, and a magnet for the press photographers, a steady flow of celebrities. And millions who land unheralded to get first impressions of Britain from its crowded #1 airport. Thousands of cars squeeze into the airport every day, and wherever you turn in and around this boom city of the air, works are in progress to meet the growth in the years ahead. This new road link with London, part of the M4 motorway, will cut more than 20 minutes off the journey from London for most people, and reduce the risk of missing plane connections. Many of today's air travellers have their cars picked up at the airport and parked elsewhere, where there's more room. But this new 5-storey car park holds more than 1,100 cars, and 2 more like it are due to go up. The face of London Airport is changing so fast that those who work here, and there are more than 30,000 of them, hardly know what to expect from one day to the next. New roads inside the airport, new buildings, the last traces of the airport's beginnings 20 years ago fast disappearing. And on the outskirts, new hotels specially serving the airport, soundproofed against the noise of the big jets. At the hub of airport life, the Queen's Building. At the heart of it, the general manager of the London Group of Airports, running an empire of the air with a vast turnover, £9 million a year at Heathrow alone. Out of every 100 passengers using the airport, 35 travel via the Britannic Building on internal flights to other parts of Britain. 20 via the Oceanic Terminal on long-haul flights, and 45 through here to Europe. The European routes are by far the busiest.
Announcing the arrival of British Overseas Airways Flight 713 from Sydney and Zurich.
But whatever the destination, every man and his wife are in a hurry. It's an on-time world, serving a public that's highly sensitive to any delay. For the immigration officers, it means a quick decision in a matter of seconds on each passenger moving in or out of the country. Behind the scenes, unusual services, such as this, for families with time on their hands at the airport. Trained nurses and welfare staff look after the children while the mothers rest, and the nurseries are equipped with toys and playrooms. In the airport's kitchens, thousands of meals are prepared for eating in the air. In this airline's flight catering centre, 5,000 meals a day, set up by 28 cooks and a chef de cuisine. The weekly order runs to nearly 500 pounds of fillet steak, 1,000 chickens, 40 pounds of caviar, and a ton of English cheeses. And the meals, they range from open sandwiches to full 4-course dinners that'll be eaten 20,000 feet or so over Europe. The jets themselves have a giant's appetite. Fuel is poured out at an incredible rate, more than half of it through one oil company's pipelines from a depot 9 miles from the airport. Without the pipelines, more than 150 road tankers would be needed to keep up the daily flow. For London Airport's jets swallow around 150 million gallons of jet fuel and between 20 and 30 million gallons of petrol a year. They're fueled from high-pressure tankers, carrying up to 10,000 gallons at a time, and filling the 20,000-gallon tanks of a Boeing 707 in 25 minutes. One flight over, another to be prepared for. Maintenance goes on round the clock. Crews report 1 hour before takeoff time. Flight planning means that a lot of information has to be collected and absorbed by the captain. The route has to be studied, alternative airports noted in case of diversion, and the Met Office consulted about winds and weather en route. The captain may ask for a weather picture for the whole of Europe, or for extra fuel. And finally comes the briefing of his crew. Just as passenger flying has increased, so has air cargo work. Today, London Airport handles around 140,000 tons of freight and mail a year, and that doesn't include supplies for passenger flights like this. The safety of the plane depends on the skilled loading and stowing of baggage in the hold. It's got to be secure and properly balanced. The boom in civil flying means big business. Fees for landing planes alone bring in more than £5 million, and charges for departing travellers abroad almost another $1 million. For the airline operators, and more than 50 companies are flying in and out of London Airport, It's a fiercely competitive industry in which prestige is vital. And one way to win prestige and influence air travelers is to fly the latest aircraft. New generation jets like the VC-10 here. And the Trident. To take some of the pressure off London Airport, this airport at Gatwick is being extended. 30 miles south of London, with a railway service right into the capital, it's already handling over 1 million passengers a year. By 1970, it'll be handling 2.5 million, and not long after that, 5 million. Its main terminal building is being doubled in size under a £2.5 million contract. But in the 1970s, London Airport and Gatwick together won't be able to cope with all London's air traffic. And Stansted Airport in Essex is planned as London's third airport. At present, it's mainly used for flying training and diversions. Heathrow is known the world over as the pilot's ideal of what an airport should be. Its standard of air traffic control is unique. Its talk-down operators legendary. Regardless of weather, all flights into London Airport are instrument-controlled. 150,000 takeoffs and landings a year, one every 90 seconds during busy periods, but it's reaching full capacity, and many a takeoff tomorrow will have to be from one of London's newer airports.
This is the way to travel. I'm sitting in the lounge of the Sultan of Oman's former VC-10, fitted out for his own personal use. Back in the 1960s, privately owned aircraft were becoming all the rage as the pre-motorway road network clogged up. This next film looks at that burgeoning industry in 1964.
Princess Alexandra goes aboard an Andover of the Queen's Flight at London Airport to carry out an engagement in the north of England. She's flying in one of the most exclusive executive aeroplanes in the world. Lord Robens, as chairman of the National Coal Board, flies off to attend a Scottish conference, travelling in the board's own Dove aircraft from Luton Airport. Many people think that executive aircraft are used only by the royal family or very special VIPs, but today, all kinds of people use them to go about their business. Jockeys, for instance, hire air taxis to fly them to racecourses when time is short. Scobie Breesley and Ron Hutchinson often do so, particularly when they're riding at 2 meetings the same afternoon. Here, they're off to Newmarket. They can land right on the course, and the plane will wait until they've finished racing to take them home again. Top executives fly to meetings in various parts of the country and get business done during the flight too. The Hawker Siddeley 125 is Britain's first jet aircraft to be specially designed for business use. With a range of 1,500 miles and a speed of around 500 miles an hour, it costs about £225,000. Sometimes, even airliners are bought for business use. Here, in the assembly shop, the £1 million BAC 111 takes shape. It normally holds about 70 passengers, but as a business plane, it can be fitted out with a conference room. Today, there are more than 600 business, taxi and private aircraft operating in Britain. Just off to Copenhagen to go on show during the British Week is the £35,000 Beagle 206, produced by a firm which has sold 373 business planes in 4 years. Miss Margot McKellar, who farms in Essex, is one of the people who use private planes for business and pleasure. She's a member of the Tiger Club at Red Hill, Surrey. She flies a two-seater aircraft, small enough to take off from a field on her farm. Aircraft executive, Mr. Peter Brooks, regularly uses his Terrier, the 2,200-pound mini of the private aircraft world, to get about on his job. And at weekends, he's always welcome at the Booker Gliding Club, where he uses his little plane as a tug to launch his friends' gliders. Only in the past 10 years has the business plane become big business. The United States now has 94,000 private and business aircraft. In Britain, about 80 firms own them, mostly conventional planes, but a few have helicopters. By remote control, Mr. Sebastian Ferranti brings out his own tiny helicopter from the garage at his Cheshire home. Flying at 80 miles an hour, it does 10 miles to the gallon and costs £11,000. When its owner sets off from his home in Knutsford to fly to his factory at Wythenshawe, 10 miles away, he'll arrive in only a few minutes longer than it takes him to take off and land. And when he presses the buttons again, this is what happens. It's uneconomic for most business companies to operate their own aircraft unless they need to use them for 500 flying hours or more a year. Those who don't often use the taxi services, which are springing up all over the country. If you've a pilot's license, you can even self-drive hire an aircraft. In London, you can arrange for a taxi helicopter to be waiting for you at the Battersea heliport by the River Thames. On an intensive course, anybody can learn to fly a helicopter in 3 weeks. But Canadian model girl Connie Fenton, who works in Paris, flew over to England every other weekend for 5 months to take flying lessons at Oxford Airport. She had to have a minimum of 30 flying hours before she could qualify for a license. And when she got it, she became Britain's second woman helicopter pilot. Once qualified, she can hire a helicopter to fly herself. But most businessmen want to hire the pilot with the aircraft. Today, it's almost as simple as hailing a taxi in the street, and may not cost more than 3 or 4 times as much. Here, on a Buckinghamshire airfield, a clerk in the control room takes a booking, first making sure there's a plane and pilot available. The control manager puts the details on the progress board. Then he briefs the pilot and later clears the plane for landings at other airports. He also gets a weather report and permission, when necessary, to fly in air lanes reserved for commercial airlines. The pilot plans his route for the journey and an hour before takeoff, checks that the plane is in good order and puts coffee and biscuits aboard. He's there to welcome his passengers when they arrive and to escort them to the aircraft. Even if the weather looks dullish from the ground, the plane will soon climb above the clouds into sunshine. The aircraft, one of a fleet of 6 of varying sizes which this company operates, is soundproofed so that passengers can get on with their work. It's almost like being in the office. The boss starts to dictate to his secretary. Later on, there's a break for 11s, just like being in the office. When you're looking at life, planes and helicopters can make excellent platforms to film what is going on from almost every angle. In these days, when time has become a very valuable commodity indeed, more and more business people are using aircraft for all sorts of jobs. They can fly to work, and they can work as they fly.
Brooklands first came to fame in 1907 as the high-speed banked motor racing circuit. It was during the First World War that the centre ground was first used by the aircraft industry. This next film looks back at the history of Brooklands from a 1960s perspective.
For more than half a century, a 374-acre site near Weybridge in Surrey, and known the world over simply as Brooklands, has been the home of speed. Speed and the development of precision engineering that produces even greater speeds, that will win races in safety. And today, speed in comfort and luxury for the great air routes of the world. For Britain's latest airliner, the Super VC-10, is another name to be added to the famous names of Brooklands. Built in the enormous hangars on the edge of the old motor racing track, this 171-foot-long giant can carry 180 passengers at a cruising speed of 600 miles per hour. Power comes from 4 Rolls-Royce jet engines, which between them develop a thrust of 40 tons, enough to push a train over. With a range of 4,000 miles, which means it can fly from London to Washington non-stop, this great aircraft is the only long-distance airliner in the world with the new-look tail-mounted engines. So today, from the stables of Brooklands, come the gleaming new VC-10s. The valiant V-bombers came from here too. The world-famous short-haul airliner, the Viscount. Before that, the Hawker Hurricane prototype of Battle of Britain fame. And earlier still, World War I aircraft, such as the Sopwith Camels. But Brooklands was probably most famous between the 2 world wars. And this was how cinema audiences of those days saw the famous K-Don. In 1928, he roared round Brooklands at an average speed of 104.5 miles an hour. This is world land and water speed record holder Sir Malcolm Campbell, captain in those days, father of the now famous Donald Campbell. The 2 3/4 mile concrete circuit, 100 feet wide and steeply banked, gave weekend racing thrills to millions of spectators from 1907 to 1939. The winners became world-famous names, men such as Sir Henry Seagrave. As well as racing in cars, many of the famous drivers of Brooklands took to flying. But after World War II, motor racing on the track was finished. 6 years of wartime neglect had left the track pitted and cracked, and the expense of rebuilding it in 1945 was too great. The days of the big cars hurtling round at speed were over. Today, sections of the old Brooklands track can still be seen, but they are hardly recognizable. The aircraft industry on the site has become bigger and bigger, and now more than 10,000 people work here on the Super VC-10 and other aircraft. In the Brooklands tradition of speed with safety, new ideas in aircraft design and construction are today producing Britain's new challenges of the air. In the past, most civil airliners have been built with thin sheets of alloy riveted to a framework. But in 1956, this technique was scrapped at Brooklands. Instead, more than a half of the Super VC-10's airframe structure is machined from solid metal. After being squared up, the giant slabs of alloy, weighing as much as 2¼ tons each, are moved by a special suction lift to the milling machines. Moving 21 feet a minute, on each pass, these mills can bite off almost an inch of metal. Planed to a 5,000th of an inch accuracy, the piece is then moved on for further cutting and shaping. And soon, the slab begins to look more like a panel, which will eventually be part of a wing or fuselage. The slab of metal is inspected for flaws by an electrical sound tester before work begins, and then the finished panel again goes through the same inspection. As much as 9/10 of the original slab of metal is cut away by the time the correct size and shape of panel is obtained. This form of construction simplifies the sealing of the fuselage and fuel tanks for high-altitude flying. It's lighter, stronger, and cheaper than conventional methods, and means far less riveting, the weakest point in aircraft construction. The less powerful version of this aircraft, the VC-10, first flew in 1962. It is now proving a favorite with passengers on commercial services. But the big Super VC-10 was not airborne until 1964. With test pilot Captain Haley Bell at the controls, the 4 big jets are started. Everything is ready, and the 150-ton monster moves onto the runway at Brooklands. This complex piece of machinery is the result of 6 years' work. 400 companies have been involved in making thousands of different parts. The plane has been assembled at Brooklands, and now the throttles are opened as Britain's new Challenger gathers speed for takeoff. Each member of the test crew concentrates on his own particular job, and steadily, easily, the big plane is airborne. Another stage of the long and expensive process of designing and building a new plane has been reached. Now that it's airborne, the Super VC-10 must be put through test after exhaustive test, for the requirements of world airlines are becoming more and more exacting. With this new shape shadowed across the clouds above Brooklands, the Super VC-10, built for the profitable but highly competitive North Atlantic routes, could be the winner that'll bring Britain the blue ribbon of the air. It's the latest embodiment of the spirit of Brooklands.
One of the true workhorses of British aviation in the 1960s to also come out of Brooklands was the Vickers Vanguard. This merchantman cargo version touched down here in 1996 as the last flying example. Well, I must be off now. I'll leave you with one last look at life, this one about the aviation industry as it was in 1967.
It's the industry where money talks in tens and even hundreds of millions of pounds. The industry that's refused to be grounded under the weight of cancelled Whitehall orders and American competition. It's a world of giants involving air forces and airlines in the sort of spending that makes even millionaires boggle. And it has a glamour and excitement all of its own. For Prince Philip, a call on the men who are trying to keep Britain in the big league of the world's plane makers. Their export target, £200 million a year. It may be an industry for giants, but there's still room for newcomers. These Islanders are made by a small Isle of Wight firm. Short-haul machines that can be used as air ambulances or for survey work, and seating up to 9 passengers. The Islanders, just one of 24 types of British aircraft, now flying or being made the Baron View at Farnborough Air Show. From this all-purpose light transport, the Skyvan, with orders from 5 airlines. And this short to medium-range 62-seater, the 748, a direct descendant in a line of planes coming from the first of Britain's plane makers, AV. To this latest bestseller, the BAC 111, a 550-mile-an-hour short-haul jet airliner, the world's first and already the greatest dollar earner ever to come from Britain's plane makers. And now, the plane that soared among the bestsellers with more than 110 ordered, many for the United States and Canada, the HS-125. Built to jet businessmen around the world, it cruises at 500 miles an hour, seats 8 passengers, and has a range of more than 1,800 miles. It's easily converted into a navigational trainer. This Franco-German plane, the Transall troop carrier, has Rolls-Royce engines built under license on the continent. The Lightning, Britain's supersonic fighter, with a performance that's mainly on the secret list. It's in squadron service with the Royal Air Force and has netted the biggest ever single export order from Saudi Arabia, £70 million worth. Another high-speed fighter in quantity production for the Royal Air Force, Hawker Siddeley's P1127. In level flight, just another modern warplane. It's at takeoff and landing that the P1127 shows her special qualities. Her powerful Pegasus engine has nozzles that swivel back in level flight, forward for braking in flight, and down for lift. It all means that the pilot is the envy of every city motorist, able to pick a tight parking spot this way. As the big jets progressively make the world smaller, so the aero engine makers of Britain have come on their busiest times. Of Rolls-Royce's 50,000 workpeople, nearly 40,000 are on aero engines, and aviation sales account for close on 90% of the firm's profits. Here they are building an engine called the Tyne, which gives very high power in relation to its size, and powers airliners as well as military transports and patrol planes. It's just one of a series of engines from Britain that keep a whole generation of aircraft flying. Rolls and Bristol Siddeley, now merged into a vast combine employing over 80,000 people, have enough orders to keep them busy right into the 1970s. Here's a Conway, the most powerful jet engine in service with any airline, the engine that powers the VC-10. The Spey, a top seller used in 9 types of civil and military planes, including the 111, the Trident, and the Navy's Buccaneer. The new Phantom Spey, a supersonic Air Force version in production for the American strike fighters ordered for the Royal Navy and the RAF, is designed to push the Phantom fighter to well beyond twice the speed of sound. And now, on the test rig at Filton, the engine that's a whole power game in itself, the Olympus. It's the engine being developed by Bristol Siddeley, jointly with their French partners Snecma, to power the world's first supersonic airliner, the Anglo-French Concorde. Four of these Olympus jets, set in pairs under the wings, will push Concorde to a cruising speed of around 1,450 miles an hour. It's Europe's most hopeful answer yet to American domination of the air industry of the Western world. A dazzling introduction to closer cooperation between Europe's plane makers. Here, too, at Filton, in the hangar built for the giant Brabazon of 2 decades ago, is the British end of the project. It's a £500 million stride into tomorrow, which each country on its own could never afford to make. Each country makes specific parts of Concorde, and each builds one prototype Concorde from parts made by both. This is prototype 2, due for its maiden flight from Filton in 1968. Some months after, prototype 1 takes to the air at Toulouse. There's no duplication of jigs, so the tail fins for both British and French Concordes are made here. And Concorde grows in a bilingual world where the French plane makers speak better English than the British speak French, but where technical standards are identical. Both British and French aluminium goes into the airframe, which must stand up to the high temperatures created when Concorde reaches her supersonic cruising speed. This mock-up is meant to give airline executives from all over the world an idea of what she'll be like inside. And if this were the real thing, her 140 passengers would soon be climbing up to 12 miles high on the way to Rio or New York in half the time it takes the fastest of today's jetliners. Yet, for all the progress Concorde stands for, it's no greater an advance than was made when Britain gave the world its first jet airliner, the Comet. Still in service, and perhaps even now, the most beautiful plane in the sky.